Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, described by Anthropic's Claude AI as widely regarded as the leading general retail industry podcast in America. So it must be true. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis, but only America? That's a little bit disappointing. We're going to have to work on that.
Got to work on that. We got to have ambitions. Our guest on this episode is Jennifer Wu, chairman and CEO of Hong Kong-based luxury department store Lane Crawford. Founded in 1850. They have stores in Hong Kong, mainland China. It's an engaging interview. Jennifer talks about her model of department store retail and more often and more broadly, great leadership insights. Now, first, we'll get to the important retail and war news of the week. And after the interview with Jennifer, we'll be back with our remarkable stories of the week and what is on our respective radar screens. Steve, I'm sure your only regret about this interview is that you are not able to talk to Jennifer in person.
Yeah, well, people will hear a little bit more about that, so we'll create a little bit of suspense. But a couple things about the interview. Well, one is I met Jennifer almost 20 years ago in Hong Kong, so it was fun to reconnect with her. But also, the day this interview is coming out, and many of you will listen to this, I will have debated on stage whether department stores can be resurrected or not. Now, we can argue, as we'll hear a little bit, about whether Lane Crawford is truly a department store, but there are definitely examples of some business models that we would broadly consider department stores that have some forward momentum and some real point of differentiation, and the Lane Crawford story is a great one, so I think people will really enjoy that.
I got lots of great feedback on the James Daunt Barnes & Noble book interview. I mean, it was a great dive into the state of book retailing and retailing in general. I found it one of the best, most engaging interviews we've done so far. I mean, have the two back-to-back is really fantastic. Now, you've got an offer, I think, on one of your books to give to the people, yeah?
Yeah, just mention really quickly, my first book, Remarkable Retail, is on sale at Amazon. Not at Barnes & Noble, unfortunately, but at Amazon for a limited time, and you'll save more than 50%. Now, my caveat is savings may vary in other countries. Books available on all the Amazon sites worldwide, so I'm not exactly sure how far that discount goes in some other countries. And also, if for some reason you don't want the hardcover, you can also get it on Audible, narrated by yours truly, as well as on ebook, Kindle.
All right, let's jump into the news. Let's start where we must, though I don't think we need to dwell on it too much. Let's think about what the implications or ongoing implications, I don't know about future implications of the war in Iran. Give me your thoughts on the latest and how retailers are thinking about it.
Yeah, real quickly, because we've been talking about this for a couple episodes now, and I imagine we will be for a while, and this is not meant to be a world affairs or economic policy comment, but Operation Epic Fubar, I think it's Operation Epic Fury, not Fubar, but those of you who don't know what that's an acronym for can go look it up. You know, really, I guess this past week or so, we saw in some respects a escalation in that it's expanded to the oil infrastructure really on both sides. And that, of course, is driving energy prices up. As we're recording this, I heard on the news that the price of oil on the Dubai market is $170 a barrel, which is by far an all-time record. And that really gets to, the disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz affecting Asia in particular more, so where the oil actually comes from. So we'll see where that sorts itself out. The thing that I really noticed this past week is all of this is really causing a lot of disruption in inflation, it's putting a lot of concerns about inflation, which has having a ripple effect into interest rates. So the U.S. Fed last week kept rates steady, but the ECB and some other markets are actually starting to talk about whether they will increase interest rates, which of course was not where we saw ourselves headed until this broke out. So again, we will see how this all sorts out, whether this is just noise for another few weeks or this is kind of our new world order, at least for a period of time.
Well, and we talk about oil a lot. I just made the additional comment about LNG, liquid natural gas, which, right. A lot of Asia runs on LNG. As you say, we're not a world affairs podcast. It's important context for what we talk about. How should leaders be thinking about this in today's world? I mean, volatility is not new. This seems to be an extra dose of volatility and uncertainty, but How would you think about it, and what would your advice be?
Well, I think it's always a good idea to model out various scenarios. I think this just puts an extra premium because you and I were talking off mic. Like you could go down one road which says this is going to be incredibly disruptive for a long period of time and really almost get, like Chicken Little kind of, oh my God, the sky is falling. We really need to take aggressive actions. But you could also make a, not contrary, but a kind of other end of the spectrum sort of argument that this is short-lived and actually over time the oil markets will flow more freely and yada, yada, yada. So anyway, I think going through the scenarios and trying to see, are there some no regrets decisions you could take? How do you hedge some of these bets? But I would say overall, given where things look to be headed, I think most retailers have to take a generally more conservative approach. That means probably being a little bit tighter on inventory, though we'll talk about in a second about maybe that's not where at least some forecasts would lead you, and be more judicious about spending capital investments. One of the problems that happens a lot is when things get tough, most retailers kind of hunker down and play defense. But those retailers that have a strong business model, that have a good balance sheet, they stay on offense. And I think we've talked about in the past, Bain and some others have studied this and show that in these difficult times, the tendency for most folks to get conservative actually allow those that are already leading to extend their leads. And then time goes by and then it's really difficult to play catch up. So I think the challenge is, how do you be appropriately conservative and realistic, but try to stay on offense as much as you can and not just end up, particularly if you're behind, falling further and further behind.
So let's move on. This week, the NRF released their sales forecast. I watched the live stream this week, and as I was watching it, I was thinking, boy, if I could have some of the chill pills they all are on, I would be great. Because they was like, hey,
I'll have what she's having. Yeah.
It's going to be a great year, and let's talk about that. Anyway, tell me what you thought about their forecast.
Well, their forecast for what they call core retail, so that excludes things like gas prices and some of the more volatile shelter, those kinds of things, but restaurants, really the more core merchandising categories. They forecast is going to grow 4.4%, and that is materially higher than the 3.6% 10-year average. And it is a little hard to square in light of what we just talked about. Now, they did put a few caveats around that, saying, with the Middle East tensions, it's really hard to go. But they still said, even in kind of a more negative scenario, they're still pretty confident that spending will hold in there. And I don't know. I guess one thing I would say, and this was part of their forecast, is so much of retail spending is being driven by high-income consumers. And I guess the assumption is high-income consumers aren't going to be affected very much by gas prices going up or food prices going up a little bit, and a number of the derivative effects we've talked about. I'm like you. I wish I had some of what they were smoking, but I guess we shall see. I would be, spoiler alert, I would be a little bit more on the pessimistic side.
They didn't talk about the constant, who gets that 4%. I mean, we've been talking for many episodes that's not spread across all retailers, and the big keep getting bigger, the more concentration. So anyway, I thought it was good. In fact, when we come back after the interview, they did a neat session on Gen Z. I had a few observations about that that I'll call out. So we'll get to that after the interview. Now let's jump into quarterly reports. So let's start with Macy's. You sometimes describe Macy's and others as running to stand still. What did you make of their latest results?
Macy's Inc. is the entity, so we have to parse out a little bit, at least the two big pieces of Macy's. So Macy's division, the Macy's stores, really is kind of in the running to stand still mode, though they continue to make some progress for sure. Just as I go in and see their stores, the ones that they've touched with their reimagination program, you can really see the visual presentation better, more obvious sales help. Those stores are performing a little bit better than the average, but it's pretty marginal. Those so-called go-forward stores were up 0.6% on a comp basis. So that is better than it has been in the past, but well below the category growth rates and some of the best performing. So I guess that's a little bit of how you interpret it. Progress, but not very dramatic. Now, the real star of the show, though, is the Bloomingdale's division, which has been on a pretty good run for, I guess, a couple years now. Their comps for the quarter were up nearly 10%. So that is clearly better than average. Now, I think the hard thing to tell, even though I'm pretty impressed with the execution at Bloomingdale's, they don't have that many stores. Their real estate, for the most part, is quite good in terms of where they're positioned. But they're clearly benefiting from the debacle at Neiman's and Saks, as we've talked about a bunch.
Yeah.
Those stores, I mean, in general, the general turmoil and closing of stores, but also they haven't had product. So it's very logical that some of those customers are going to end up going to Bloomingdale's or Nordstrom or the higher end competition. Now, I guess the other thing I'll just say quickly, from a margin perspective, tariffs were a bit of a headwind. They're continuing to get pretty good profit contribution from the credit card business as well as the retail media network. So overall, decent, but not amazing. Now, the outlook, I think, is what's most interesting, which is they are forecasting, despite 2 years now into this bold new strategy, they are forecasting overall flat sales. Now, they did not call this out specifically, but I assume that means the Macy's brand is likely to be down. So that is not indicative of a turnaround, while Bloomingdale's continues to be up. But if you're going to go through the numbers, I assume part of that assumption is Saks and Neiman's are now back in stock. They will be gaining a little bit more momentum, and that's going to make it harder for Bloomingdale's to run the kind of numbers they've been running.
Well, let's stretch our minds over to Lululemon. What did you think of their okay results? Not so great, but there's some bright spots.
Well, yeah, I saw what you did with the stretch there. So there was some momentum downward, dog. Sorry, that was terrible. Well, it depends on what part of the world we're talking about.
Right.
Lululemon had their sales down in the Americas, but international was pretty strong. So when you kind of parse it all out, it was pretty meh overall. Their earnings actually got worse. They talked about tariffs being very much a significant headwind. They said in the coming year, tariffs are going to hit them to the order of $380 million. And that compares to $275 million last year. So that's not great. But this has been Lululemon's really been struggling for quite a while now. The stock is down quite a lot over a 5-year period, but down more than 40% just in the past year. And of course, there's been a lot of boardroom drama. I know you've been following the machinations here. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit, as our honorary Canadian here, not honorary Canadian, as our actual
official,
Canadian.
I'm the official Canadian.
I think I'm an honorary Canadian. Yeah.
I do believe so. I do believe so. Well, the other official Canadian, Chip Wilson, who is the founder, and I think he's still the largest shareholder, 7 or 8%. So he would be feeling that stock reduction, and his wealth continues to take it to the next level. He's put forward people to be on the board. He's launched a whole new website. Maybe we'll put a link in the show notes if you want to read 3 pages of legalese up front. But if you dive in, it's pretty interesting. I mean, either Chip is got some time on his hands or he's pretty motivated. Maybe it's a little bit of both, because he also does run Arc'teryx, which is a thriving business. So anyway, it's great gossip. I've met Chip back in the day, and he's quite an iconoclast in Canadian and I guess in international retail. So I guess you could say it's for people like us who like to comment on things. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. I do think this issue, if you kind of step back, is how does a brand that's become so ubiquitous find ways to grow? We've talked about some of their own goals and some things that you could certainly argue they didn't execute very well, but it seems like they keep trying to reach this really mass market, and they've really lost that edge. And so can you narrow and become fundamentally more special and profitable, but as a publicly traded company that the market loves to see growth? Is it growth in revenue, or is it really growth in relevance and profitability? And I think that's an interesting strategy question. And he definitely seems to be pushing on that particular leverage point.
So let's talk about Five Below. It's a business that I continue to watch with great interest. They're turning up fantastic numbers, and they've got a great thing going. So talk about their numbers.
Yeah, there's lots of earnings to talk about. The one I wanted to end with is Five Below, because it's such a strong story of a brand that has really found a powerful niche in a crowded market, the more off-price dollar store world is certainly not lacking in competition, but Five Below, which is just in the US, has really found a niche. Their full year sales up 23%, comps up almost 13%. I mean, it's just really hard to see numbers like that on a business that's got almost 2,000 stores already. Quite profitable, growing very, very fast. They will open another 150 stores this year. That's about the same number I believe they opened last year, which will get them to about 2,100 stores in 48 of the 50 U.S. states. So if you're not aware of Five Below and you sometimes think, where am I going to find a niche that I can really carve out in what seems to be a crowded market, they are a great case study to take a look at. And who knows, maybe they'll be heading up north or heading over to the continent or something like that in the years ahead. We'll have to get Winnie Park, their CEO, on the pod to talk about that.
All right. Well, that's a wrap on the news. Now let's get to our interview with Jennifer Wu from Lane Crawford. And after our interview with Jennifer, we'll be back with our remarkable stories of the week and what is on our respective radar screens.
Well, Jennifer, welcome. We're so glad to have you here. It's taken us a little bit of a journey. You and I were supposed to meet once again on stage in Abu Dhabi for Shop Talk Luxe, but I didn't make it there. You made it there, and I understand rocked the stage. But thanks for joining us on the Remarkable Retail Podcast. How are you?
Very well. Very happy to be here.
Well, we're excited to talk to you about the business and your journey and all those kinds of things. And speaking of your journey, maybe before we dive in, because I'm sure many people will know the business, but just in case people don't, maybe just a little bit about how you came to be where you are today, and then we'll talk a little bit about Lane Crawford.
Okay, that's a bit of a long story, but I'll keep it short. So I'm an alumni of Wellesley College, and after graduation, I was in Boston working in advertising. I studied psychology, so I thought advertising was an interesting place to start. Being a Hong Kong resident, British citizens, I wasn't able to get a normal work visa. So I had to, after a year of working there, I had to leave the United States to wait for my proper visa to come through. And while that happened, my father was very opportunistic and said to me, well, you have about a month and a half or so. What do you want to do? So he's like, let's go on a cruise. So he tempted me with a cruise. And I was like, okay, sure. I'll go on a cruise with you and the family. And then afterwards, he's like, well, that's done. And you still have like a month left. What do you want to do? I said, I don't know. I'll come back to Hong Kong, hang out with mom or something like that. And he's like, well, this is a little business in the portfolio that is going through some interesting transformation. Maybe that would be interesting for you. And I said, sure. I'll go intern there for a few days or weeks. I should have known something was up when I entered the office and they gave me cards that were printed with my name on it. And there was also a little office built for me somewhere.
Oh,
anyway, so I started in the merchandising department. I was working for the handbag buyer at that time. And then the rest is history. I fell in love with the business. I fell in love with the craft of retail. It led me to become president when I was 26, I think, in 2002 or something. My father brought me home one day and said, you know what, Jennifer, you are complaining about Lane Crawford all the time. Let's put your money where your mouth is. You do this job now.
Well, it seems like it's worked out okay for you.
Yeah. So at the age of 26, I had to learn how to run a business, and transform a business at the same time. So it was quite an MBA, let's say.
Pretty fun journey. So just for people that don't understand the breadth and scope of the Lane Crawford Joyce Group, maybe just give a quick flavor for that, and then we'll really dive into some of the things we want to talk to you about.
Yeah, so Lane Crawford Joyce Group is a retail holding company that holds Lane Crawford, which is 175 years old. And we also have a a small boutique company called Joyce, which is a multi-brand boutique. And we also have a trading arm. And this is the company that partners with a lot of brands that we worked with in the multi-brand business that are looking to expand in the region. So we started that business with that intention, but then it grew to become a business that helped brands in general enter the China market. So we work with over 20 some brands, and we either run their store on their behalf as a management service, we do a joint venture with them, or we do a distribution business with them. That company is called Imaginex.
I was going to say, in the Lane Crawford department store, how many stores? And you're in several markets now, right?
Yeah, so we're headquartered in Hong Kong, and we are one of the oldest department stores in the world. As I said, 175 years old. It's independently owned. We are across Greater China, and we have 4 stores in Hong Kong and 2 stores in China. And we have an e-commerce platform. We also have a digital WeChat and Red Mini program in mainland. So we are not a full-line department stores. We don't have every single department, but we do have fashion, home and lifestyle, beauty, wellness, fine jewelry, and we really do everything from a fashion point of view. And we serve around 2 million luxury customers across more than 30 cities in Greater China beyond our physical locations in Hong Kong.
You know, Jennifer, like Steve, I spent many years in the department store retail space. In my case, Hudson's Bay, one of the formerly oldest companies in the world here in Canada, and led at one point by Bonnie Brooks. So I think there's a connection there.
She's my mentor.
Fantastic.
When I became president, when I was like 26, my father said, "Don't worry, you're not doing it on your own. You have a mentor by your side." So Bonnie was really the person that helped me understand and build this
great
business
merchant
and create the vision that is the new Lane Crawford.
I've been researching into the way you go to market and some really interesting differences between what Lane Crawford, the department store, does and many other department stores. Can you explain some of those? There's no concessions. The stores are a bit smaller. The leases are a bit shorter. Talk about that for a bit.
Well, first of all, we operate in one of the most expensive and competitive real estate markets in the world. So we don't have what people expect, which is a heritage flagship store. We really compete in malls, in shopping districts, which are really highly saturated with all the luxury brands. So we run very compact stores. So our stores are about 80,000 square feet each. And so if you put all our store portfolio of Lane Crawford into one store, it fits neatly into one Oxford Street Selfridges, basically. And because we are in this region where the real estate is very expensive, we run on short leases. The landlords, work in a different way here. So department stores are usually around the world are used to, 100-year leases.
Yeah, 99 years. I signed one of those.
99 years. One of our shortest leases is 3 years.
Wow.
That's what we're working on, which keeps us on our toes, I tell you. It means that we really have to constantly prove ourselves to the landlord or we're out. It's a very, very...
I'd almost call that the no plan B strategy, right?
Oh, no.
Right? It's like, this has got to work or we're looking for new real estate.
It has to work.
It's got to work.
It keeps us honest and keeps us running a very good business. I mean, a lot of people ask me what sustainability is. Sustainability is staying in our locations.
Right. Well, picking up on that theme, it's no secret many department stores around the world are struggling. RIP Hudson's Bay, for example, one of the formerly oldest stores. Now, you believe, though, that this model and what you've built and what you've transformed can be a model for the future, not just where you are, but elsewhere. What gives you that confidence? What is your animating principle behind that?
We spoke earlier today about my mentor, Bonnie Brooks, who is a merchant. So we really believe in the merchant craft, the craft of retail. It's really the buy-sell process end to end. And because we are own bought we are a own bought business, which means that we manage all the product ourselves and we invest in all the product ourselves. We are able to create the experiences for our customers. A lot of other stores have a lot more concessions, and they're also so it's a different customer experience as well. So a customer going from one concession to another concession will have to use a new POS, and they have to go from one sales staff to another sales staff. For us, because we are an own bought business, our customers can have a seamless experience right the way through our stores.
So one of the things when we were prepping for our talk in Abu Dhabi, I know one of the big points you made about was being relationship driven rather than transactional. Now, lots of retailers say that. I would argue maybe not so many actually do it. Can you talk about what that means for Lane Crawford? But I think in particular, what do you do to make sure that actually happens at shop level, at customer level?
For us, it goes back to the craft of retail and creating that experience for our customers. So, it's really interesting. During the pandemic and during the challenges around our business, we, by default, kind of just discovered that if we lean further into the relationship part of our business, it really does unlock a lot of opportunities for us. So relationship business for us is really around this the clienteling engine of our business. We are really looking at how to deepen our relationship with our customers. So each sales staff, they are really looking at managing about 100 to 150 top clients. We are giving them 24/7 service, and our sales staff treat them like family. And our customers treat our sales staff like family. One of our customers said that one of our team members is their happy nut in their family. So, we have about 35,000 one-on-one relationships. And, my grand ambition is to personalize department stores for every single customer. So that is really the antithesis of what a department store is, because traditionally department stores are, okay, here are all the departments, this is what we're buying, come into the store and have an experience. We're turning that on its head and really looking at the customer, looking at relationships in a different way. We're really starting with the customers with everything that we're looking at, from buying, presentation to selling.
Can I just probe on that a little bit? How much of that is, I guess I'm trying to understand. I mean, obviously you must have built a very strong culture. It must have a lot to do with picking the right sort of people and supporting them. But how much of that is training? How much of that is technology? Like, how do you really make that happen on a day-to-day basis? Because even though that's, in the scheme of some retailers, not that many customers, it's still quite a lot of customers and quite a lot of your team managing all this.
Yeah, we're very lucky because in Asia, service is intuitive, so we don't have to train that. So what we do train, and a lot of people say, okay, what's your playbook when it comes to customers and relationship? Well, we don't have one. Our ask for our sales staff and our clienteling and our stylists are to deepen relationships with our customers. And we give them tools to empower them to do that. And we also celebrate their successes every week. So I think, a lot of people talk about this, but let me give you some examples of some customer experiences. During COVID, there was a customer that had lost, whose family left Hong Kong, and they ended up having the house to themselves. They were quite lonely. And our sales team engaged with them daily and created content just for them and created animation just for them. And even though they couldn't see each other and have physical connection, they were in contact constantly. And at the end of the pandemic, they came back into the store and gave our sales staff a massive big hug and said, you know what, you saved my life. right? So who would ever say that luxury retail would ever have that in conversation with a customer? So that's one example of a real human authentic connection that comes to life. Another example is, we had a new customer come into the store and they had a new home. And our sales staff didn't really know this customer, but this customer was also in a rush. So they made an appointment to go see the new home. It was completely empty. And the sales staff took initiative and on the day of the appointment filled up a whole truck full of homeware and lifestyle goods and brought it over to the house. And by the end of the meeting, the customer bought everything in the truck
Wow.
except for two things, which is an ashtray and I think a whiskey decanter because he didn't drink and he didn't smoke. There's another example of a customer that came through Hong Kong who had left Hong Kong a while back and said, "Oh, I'm just coming back to Hong Kong I'm literally touching down and leaving the next day. But I wish I could come to your store, but I can't because your store is closed." So the the sales staff said, "Don't worry, just come anyway." So this this staff opened the store. I think the customer arrived at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And, they had a whole big reunion party, a big fashion show. They had a midnight feast. And they didn't even leave the store until like 2 or 3 in the morning, right? So, and the customer had to leave on the plane the next day.
We'll be right back with our interview with Jennifer Wu from Lane Crawford right after these messages. The biggest names in retail don't guess. They use Placer AI. Placer's location intelligence platform turns foot traffic into real strategy, giving you near real-time insights into market share, cross-shopping trends, and trade areas for any location in America. Whether you're entering a new market, tracking a competitor, or optimizing your existing footprint, Placer gives you the data to decide with confidence. Visit placer.ai to see it in action. Physical retail isn't dead, but boring, unremarkable retail is most definitely dead or dying. So how do you become the compelling signal amid all the noise, distraction, transformational new technologies, and escalating competition? If you haven't read Remarkable Retail, How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption, Steve's first best-selling book, what better time than now? You'll learn the most important trends shaping modern retail today, explore Steve's 8 Essentials of Remarkable Retail's strategic framework, and be inspired to rise above the rest. Remarkable Retail is available just about everywhere where books are sold, as well as Audible and an ebook on Kindle for $9.99.
I tell these stories because the sales staff don't have a playbook to say fill a truck or to make a connection with a customer who's going through a difficult time or to close a store for a midnight feast. They don't have a playbook to do that. They are empowered to do that with tools, with budgets. They are empowered to deepen the relationships with our customers, and we celebrate that weekly internally. I have a weekly vlog, and I invite the top sellers on sometimes, and I say, what makes you tick? What makes you such a great sales staff? And they share their stories, and then we take that content and we put it into our academy, and then that really helps new sales members come on board and learn the craft of what we do. So relationships are at the center of everything that we do. Our customers are always at the forefront of everyone's minds.
It's such a fascinating way to self-propagate that skill that is resonant in your team. And by the way, you've given me a whole new concept of truckload sale for me to work with after that story. Yeah, speaking of product, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about product, because I'm sure if you work with Bonnie Brooks, you're pretty passionate about product. And so talk about how you source your product, what makes it different, work with local designers, unique offerings. So how do you, I think Jellycats, I was on your site, just some amazing products. Talk about product for a while.
Yes, we are very passionate about product, and we're very passionate about the merchant craft. So as you know, traditional department stores are, they buy product by department, by brand. And that worked for a while, but I don't think it works right now. It doesn't work for me as a customer. So why would it work for our customers? So a few years ago, we shifted our open to buy, our investment in product, to invest about 50% of our open to buy into independent designers. And out of the 800 brands that we buy, about 120 are Asian designers, and that number keeps on growing because of the proximity, the resonance, the aesthetic, the fit, and Asian pride. So we're looking at investing in very different product that our customers wouldn't see anywhere else. But that's really only step one. Step two for us is to really look at how product optimizes for the connection with our customers. So buyers are really tasked to unlock desires, to feed the obsessions of our customers. So how we buy, where we buy, how frequently we buy, and then when that product lands in store, how do we present that product? We really are really looking at presenting it not by departments, not by racks and racks of clothes, but peppering very different curations right through the store so that customers don't see an offer by department or by brand. They see it by curation.
They see it by their lifestyle, right? Kind of their, as you envision it. Yeah. Interesting.
Absolutely. And then we look at how we sell it, right? How do our sales staff sell it? Do they sell it by brand, or do they sell it by look, by curation, by lifestyle? So this is a 360 approach to product. Product is not just about going out to the fashion week and going to the fashion shows and sitting in the front row.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
It's a very different way to scout product, to introduce product and curate that.
I quick follow up on that. I have a client here in Canada, Loblaws, who very, very big grocer, and they set up a small vendor, a small supplier program because the needs were very, very different. They get paid faster, they get tutored on how to grow their business. Is that how you set your merchants up as well? Because doing business with major global brands is different than designer brands around the corner. Any thoughts on that?
Well, this goes into how to set up the organization in a dynamic way, and so there are some buyers that are they're very important to us to really manage those big brand relationships, which we continue to have and continue to grow. We also have a pocket of buyers who are much more about the curation, and they go out and they go to the fairs, and they do a different type of buying. So it's two different type of skill sets, and we need both for us to be able to create that proposition that enables us to have product to fully be optimized for that connection with our customers.
Right on. Last question for me, and then I'm going to pass the mic to Steve. Could you speak a minute about technology and the role of technology? I mean, you've got so many direct connections with customers. I think about how to scale that, and there's lots of talk about how you can use technology to be more direct, to be more personalized or not. But what's your perspective on technology in the business?
Well, technology is a very important tool for any business and for us to be able to deepen our relationship with our customers. But it isn't the answer to growth for us. It is a tool to enable that. We really lean more into the humanization of everything that we do, and technology is there to enhance and enable us to do that. So when we talk about the humanization of our content, we're talking about live streaming. In our region, live streaming has been around for many, many years and very, very mature. So technology is there to enable us to do that in the way that makes sense for our customers. We also have humanization of our product. So we have been working with some celebrities in our region, because in our region, I think Western celebrities don't resonate in the same way. So we work with some celebrities who have massive followings in the region, and we curate product capsules for them. So that really brings a brand to life. And we use technology to be able to reach more people, to be able to share that product. And finally, in terms of styling, the humanization of styling, we have a uh, AI bot that we are training. But it's funny, everybody is believing that AI is the answer to everything. But working with it, if you just depend on the AI and the algorithm, it's not going to give you anything that works very well
Right.
for humans.
Yeah. You find its shortcomings really quick, right? When you start working with it, right?
Very quick. So what we have learned is that we really have to teach it from a human point of view. So humans are teaching it, right? So we are looking at it only purely as a B2B to begin with, to have our top stylists train this machine with human input, and to hard code some parts of the training, so that we don't let the algorithm start its work until much later in the process.
Mm.
So as an example, we have we launch the season every season with our customers, and our top stylists put together 30 or 40 looks each time. And so we feed the AI machine with those looks that we curate at a very high level. It's very elevated curation. And then we ask our top stylist then to go in and curate even more looks from those SKUs, to be able to make it even more accurate. And from there, we will be able to give our new sales associates or stylists this tool to enable them to build their craft of how to sell curation. So then, they have this tool to help them. And they have all the best of our stylists putting in all their, best knowledge into this tool. And that's how we're using technology from a styling point of view, to bring it to life. Because I think if we didn't have that human element, it would just be any other algorithm, any other AI styling curation solution.
Yeah. I mean, so much of what you talk about is just so interesting and so fascinating. I'm wondering, being mindful of our time, but I'm also being mindful that we have a global audience, many of whom are probably listening to this because they're keenly interested in luxury and fashion, but they may be in different types of businesses. And I guess what I'm wondering is whether you have any kind of leadership advice, because you've done so much on the product side, the merging of technology, this humanization, a lot of your pillars. Any thoughts on more broadly what leaders can do to be able to get their businesses to be more customer relevant, to be more personalized, to bring that human element maybe back, or at least balance out where technology is taking them?
Yes. Department stores are usually built to last, not to change. So for us, we really need to build department stores to change, to last. And to do that, we need to be able to break down the walls of the departments in the department store and make it much more fluid. So we need to really put through the human centric systems in the organization to break the rigidity of what department stores and how they're set up traditionally. It takes a lot of work internally to get the silos to be working together in a dynamic way. It takes face time. It takes connection. So if we want connection with our customers, we need to connect internally. So creating opportunities for different departments to connect is really, really important. And for us, it always goes back to the mastery of craft. I mean, if this craft is done well, there's no reason why department stores cannot be fit for purpose in the future. So, mastery for me is not about high performance, right? High performance is important. Yes, you need to hit targets. That's really important. But you don't hit targets at the expense of our craft. So, you can't, if you're talking about a silversmith or blacksmith, you can't start with the ultimate uh, sword that you want to create, right? You have to start with a horseshoe first. So it takes time, it takes practice, and it takes
Sure.
season after season to be able to go at to go at it, to improve. So we always say internally, it's all about progress, not perfection.
Well, listen, this has been just such an amazing conversation, Jennifer. On behalf of Steve and I, thanks so much for joining us. And it was really great to get your insights, and look forward to watching with keen interest this version of department stores, because boy, there's lots of activity and lots of transformation happening. But it sounds like you've grounded it in both the human experience and product. So congratulations on everything you've accomplished, and wishing you much continued success.
Thank you.
Let's talk about Remarkable Story of the Week. What's yours?
Well, this is both some specific things that prompted this, as well as just kind of a broader point. We've talked about the wobbly unicorns on here for a few years, and I was reflecting because I was working on something else about one of the things I said in my first book about, so this was 6 years or so ago when I wrote it, that I was pretty skeptical of some of the so-called digitally native vertical brand business models being long-lasting. And what I said in particular was, will this generation have its own pets.com kind of, blowing up? And
Right.
and I said, maybe even several. Well, it's turned out that quite a few of these brands have blown up. And, we talked about the collapse in the valuations of some of these hot brands. We talked about the Allbirds retrenchment a few weeks ago. Well, the particular thing this week is Glossier, which has been a very hot brand, opening
Mm-hmm.
quite a few stores. Well, they're going in the other direction now. They have a new CEO who is taking the Glossier store count down from 12, and the presumption that there would be more. They're actually closing, and they're going to retrench down to just 3. There's also been some rumors about Everlane, which was also a brand that's raised quite a lot of money. Their CEO actually several years ago was a big proponent of digitally native vertical brands opening stores, because he basically said being online only was a recipe to just burn through cash. Well, Everlane is in need of cash and apparently struggling to raise that money. I've heard some other, I'm not going to name any names, just to partially to protect myself if I'm wrong, but also not to call out anybody in particular. But I've heard about a couple other brands that are very high profile that have quite a few stores where there are rumors they may be retrenching as well. So it's just really interesting that we get all this hype about these digitally native vertical brands. And for the most part, not exclusively, most of them have not worked. And in Substack last week, I wrote about the part 1 of my algebra of retail, and one of the little sub-stories I had was that analog native vertical brands are greater than digitally native vertical brands. And I always notice when I walk around the mall, the majority of the stores in a mall are brands that were started 20, 30, 40 years ago, vertically integrated. And, despite all the hype, all the years later, you add up the analog native vertical brands, and they are many orders of magnitude bigger than these brands that kind of sucked up all the oxygen in the disruption narrative over the past, whatever it is, 8, 9, 10, 11 years.
On my side, I mentioned earlier that there was during the NRF session, there was a Gen Z interview that I found interesting. A couple of points I'd call out. I like this idea that they were talking about the treat or trinket culture. We don't have a lot of money, but we like to shop very often. I hear that from retailers all the time, that their traffic is good. And Gen Z, at one point, we thought would never go to the mall. They're just going to be online only, kind of similar to what your point is. Just the opposite is true. They want to break. They want to break from all the noise, all the AI slop that's coming at them in the platforms. So I thought that was super interesting. And then speaking of AI, like this, their views as a segment about AI is really bifurcated, if I can use that word. Because on the one hand, they're a little worried about it, and they're really worried about it, actually. In fact, Deloitte did a survey that 63% of Gen Z workers worried AI will take my job and my future. So how excited do you think they're going to get about AI shop bots? So I just thought that's interesting perspective. 61% say that it's going to make it harder for me and my colleagues to actually find a job. So how excited are you going to be to use AI to shop? And the last point, now, of course, this was from the Pinterest people, was that, Gen Z are very visually oriented, and, by and large, AI is pretty text oriented. So maybe there's a bit of a disconnect there. So anyway, before we get all to, hey, they're all going to get on board AI and it's going to make us wonderful and they're all going to use shop bots, I just thought that they made some super interesting points that caused me to reflect on a few things. All right, let's get to what's on our radar screens.
I heard a little bit of a counter narrative to all the kind of doom and gloom around the impacts of the war, and this is more U.S. centric for sure, but we're right in the heart of tax refunds coming out, as well as the so-called great big beautiful bill from the Trump administration, which has tax cuts in it and some other provisions. Whether or not this injection of money back into the hands of consumers will be enough to potentially offset some of the inflationary impacts that we see from the war. So I think this is something that we'll really be able to get a pretty good handle on over the next several weeks, really, just to see if that has a bit of a mitigating effect, because it's really happening at the same time where we are seeing gas prices go up and starting to see some of the other things kind of feather out through the economy.
For me, I've been thinking about this, and then there's a New York Times article talking about it in detail, the luxury market and Dubai and the UAE, which is basically ground to a halt. It just, I was thinking how much of the luxury market is focused in that, how much luxury sales, 6 to 9 billion a year. I mean, some of these malls you've been there, they just do amazing business. Yeah. And in fact, what do they say that the average resident shops once every 3 months for a luxury good? Now, this is all grinding to a halt. Now, if this lasts, back to if this lasts, this is going to be a big hit on the luxury retail market. Are people going to, tourism goes down? Are people going to shop in the other big luxury centers? Maybe they go to London, maybe they go to New York City, maybe they come to Toronto. So anyway, that's what I'm kind of.
If you can get on a plane out of Dubai or Riyadh, or
exactly. Or if your plans were to go to Dubai, come to Dubai, Habibi. Maybe you're not going to go to Dubai. You're going to go to London. So maybe things will be different. But the Russians aren't coming to New York, and the Russians aren't coming to London. So anyway, very dynamic, and I thought there's an outsized impact on the luxury retailers, perhaps. All right, that's our show for this week.
Thanks for tuning in. To help more retail leaders discover the industry's leading podcast, please drop us that 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy your pods. And for more on my strategic advisory services, keynote speaking, best-selling books, and even more retail industry insights, go to StephenPDennis.com.
If you are a brand or service provider looking to take your influence to the next level, reach out to us for sponsorship, advertising, or event partnerships. And if you want to learn more about my own keynote speaking and advisory practice, reach out to me via LinkedIn.